Back to the Bullpen podcast, the show where we dive into real conversations with local business leaders about what it takes to succeed. Today, I'm joined by Greg Ackerson, the founder of InBYLT and Apex Water Solutions, two Minnesota-based businesses that are making waves. Greg's not just leading companies, he's redefining what it means to build with purpose, invest in people, and bring innovation to industries that are critical to our future. In this episode, we'll talk about what it's like to lead through growth and change and how Greg balances innovation with execution. It's an inspiring look at leadership, culture, and the kind of mindset it takes to build something that lasts. Greg, thanks for stepping into the bullpen.
Thanks for having me on today, Dylan. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And for those unfamiliar, tell us more about InBYLT and Apex and the inspiration to start both businesses.
So a little background. So we've got two kind of very different companies. So InBYLT deals largely with construction, design and construction of public sector buildings. So everything from municipal facilities, K-12 school facilities, ice arenas. And Apex Water Solutions focuses on the on-site treatment of landfill leachate. So there we're working at landfills. So it's very much of more of a technology developing business. So we've got two, we kind of call InBYLT as our core business, and Apex Water Solutions is our on-site leachate treatment system that we're kind of taking off with. So the inspiration to start them is kind of an interesting story. So my business partner and I worked together previously, and we worked for a company that had a great culture. They were doing some pretty cool things. They always had employees first, and it was great for a few years. And then over time, the culture just shifted a bit. And so it's kind of like driving a boat. If you're on a course, right, you're on track, and if you go out 5 degrees off course for a while, well, it's not a big deal. You're pretty close to where you used to be. But if after a while, each year and year, you keep slipping 5 degrees off course, pretty soon you've moved quite a ways away from kind of that ideal state. And so that was going on, where my business partner and I were starting to get a little frustrated and saying, hey, like, this place was awesome. It's still really good. Still really good company. But it just wasn't quite the same as it used to be. And right during that same time, I was preparing for our first mission trip to Haiti. So we were trying to figure out to go, what are we going to do? How's this going to work? So we were in the midst of all of that. And then there was kind of this discontent at work. And so I started praying a lot. My business started praying a lot. And it's like, okay, God, what are we supposed to do here? Right. And so ultimately that prayer was answered. That's a whole nother long story. It was answered a few times. I'm just not very smart or very good at listening sometimes. But so finally we're like, okay, we get it. We got it. Let's try and start something new, right? Let's start Apex. Let's start InBYLT. And so that genesis, that formation, that call has kind of impacted our culture and how we operate and how we do things. So we've always tried to be very careful to say, hey, yeah, we're the owners of the company legally, right? Blah, 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 blah. But it wasn't us. We were called, right, through prayer to do this. So it is our company, but it's really God's company. So what does that mean? So we tithe our corporate profits into our employee bonus pool. We also tithe our corporate profits pre-tax into our foundation. So half the dollars go to domestic Christian charities, half the dollars go to international charities. We've also said, hey, if we were called to do this, like, how do we make an impact? So every other year we take our employees on a mission trip. The company pays for it and everything. And so it's a chance for us to go make an impact in the world. And it's a chance to be impacted, to grow. And so we're one of the first specific benefit corps in Minnesota, or a public benefit corp. So yeah, we are for profit. Yeah, we need to make a profit to keep going, to add people, to grow, to do all that kind of stuff. But we're not driven by the almighty dollar. We're driven by going, how do we make a difference, right? How do we make the world a better place? How do we create a culture that impacts our employees? And that evolves a little bit each year to year, but that's kind of one of the things that definitely separates us from a lot of organizations out there. And it's also one of the things that really drives us. But that's kind of the genesis of how it all started and what we were called to do.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing so much detail on that and kind of leaning into that culture.
You have rise as a big driver of your culture, right? So responsibility, integrity, service, and excellence. So how do those translate into your day-to-day decisions?
So, exactly like you said, we call it RISE, right? Responsibility, integrity, service excellence. That's our core values. And so sometimes they can be a little bit obtuse, right? So one of the things we've done is go, how do we distill those down? So we're trying to make a decision during the day, right? In this hour, in this minute. And so we've kind of distilled them down within our culture to say, what's the right thing, right? Let's do the right thing. So taking responsibility, that's the right thing, right? Having integrity, that's the right thing. Providing excellent service, both to our teammates, right? Internally, service to each other, service to our clients, right? Doing what we do with excellence, all those things, and you boil it, that's the right thing to do. And so that's one of the things that we've embedded in our decision-making process is to go, hey, as we're making a decision, let's talk about pros and cons, what are our options, let's lay them all out. And then we always end with, what's the right thing? And ironically enough, the right thing becomes pretty evident most of the time, right? It's not usually the easiest, not always most profitable, but what's the right thing to do? And in the few times where it's really unclear, we come down, we got two, you still down from 6 or 8 things down to here's the 2, what do we want to do? If we can't really decide what the right thing to do is, it's pretty easy to go, well, which one's harder? That's ironically always the right thing to do. So far in our experience, the right thing to do has never been the easiest path, but it doesn't matter because that's what we need to do. And so distilling our values down into that one question really kind of helps that become our guidepost to go, when we're called to do something, we have to make a decision. That's the question, and ultimately the answer.
Definitely the integrity, the I being the driver of that. I think that's the right way to do business, and I think you'll get the reward in the end, both personally and professionally. So what's something you believed about leadership 10 years ago that you see differently now?
So I think 10 years ago, my kind of perception of being a leader, right, was having the answers. If I rewind the clock even all the way back to the beginning of my career, I remember I was just starting out, and we do annual reviews with my manager, and every year we'd sit down, oh, here's what to work on, here's you're doing great. And then one of the questions in the review process within that organization was, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What do you want to be doing 5 years from now? And so the first year I said, hey, 5 years from now, I'm going to have everything figured out. I'm going to be great at my job. I want to be a manager. And about 4 years in, it was the same thing. What do I do 5 years from now? Well, 5 years from now, even though I was 4 years in, I want to be a manager. 7 years in. Well, 5 years from now, and my boss eventually kind of laughed. He goes, you put the same thing down every year. You never say, hey, next year. You always say 5 years from now. Well, yeah, because I've got a lot left to learn, right? Like, I'm not ready yet. I still need to learn more. And that's one of the things that's changed in my mind is being a leader isn't about having the answers, because we'll never have the answers, right? That's not what it's about. What it's about is trying to set a vision, a culture, and then working with your team to say, okay, what are we going to do? And have it be more of a collaborative process to say, hey, here's our vision, here's our goals, right? Here's what we're trying to accomplish. So how do we work together to make that happen? And if I have the right answer, that's awesome. But it's rarely the case that I do. It's almost always, hey, let's brainstorm, let's throw ideas out, and then everybody contributes a little bit. You pick the best parts of it and go, all right, this is what we think we should do. Is everybody on board? All right, let's go. And so that's the thing that I think has changed the most in my mind is it's not about having the answers. And there's an analogy I used with an employee once ago on because he wanted to be a leader, and it's like, okay, well, it's kind of like being on a hike. If you've got the direction, right, and you're setting the tempo, and you're out there blazing a trail, then after a few hours, you look around behind you, and there's nobody there because you moved too fast, you jumped over things, whatever it is. There's nobody there. That's not leading, right? It's about having the group and working together, making sure the pace is right, making sure everybody's on board. And yeah, you still got to set the direction, but the group can only move as fast as the slowest member. The group can only move cohesively as a team, right? But if you're doing it as a team, you can achieve so much more, right? The obstacles you can overcome as a team is so much greater than you trying to do things by yourself. So that's probably the biggest thing that's changed about leadership in my perspective I figured the leader has all the answers, and I've come very quickly to realize, yeah, that's it's not the case, and I will never have all the answers. Because if the world relied on me having all the answers, we'd be in a really, really bad spot.
Your companies sit at the intersection of multiple sectors: sustainable construction, energy efficiency, water treatment. How do you balance staying ahead of technical innovation while also keeping the business viable and grounded?
Great question. I think we do. I think we do, as a general rule, pretty good at this, but we do not have all the answers. And I think, right, part of it is just realizing that the world changes, right? Change is the only thing that's constant, right? So, and it seems like every couple years, the pace of change even comes at you faster and faster. So one of the things that we try to do is we call it just staying nimble, right? Being able to flex and adjust. And when you boil that down, to me, it's kind of celebrating mistakes, right? Because if we're not making mistakes, then we're not learning. Now, we try very hard to go, okay, let's go out and make a mistake. Let's not make the same one twice, right? Like, let's learn. If we make a mistake, all right, what went wrong? Should we have seen something different? What are we going to do different next time? What did we learn? Let's not make the same mistakes twice. But if we have a negative perception around making mistakes, that's really, really poison within a culture, and it really stops you from being able to be nimble, to learn, to adjust, right? So it really is around almost celebrating mistakes. So we say every day, let's not make the same one twice, but tomorrow make a new one, right? Like, let's go try new things. Let's make a mistake. Let's try and have people involved in it rather than just one person. So we minimize the cost of potential mistakes as much as possible, right? But let's celebrate them and go, all right, hey, that didn't work. We get it. No harm, no foul. What are we going to learn? How do we do it different? Because things will come up again. But let's keep making mistakes. If we stop making mistakes, we stop growing, we stop learning, then you're dead, right? Whether that's as an organization, whether as a person, right? Like as a parent having a kid, right? Like that's how I learn. I learn all my lessons the hard way, unfortunately. Wish I didn't. Wish I was smarter than that, but I'm not. So let's keep making mistakes.
Absolutely. And there's a recent quote I heard about mistakes. They don't happen just because it's you. It's because stuff just happens. So many leaders struggle to translate vision into daily execution. How do you make sure your strategic goals actually show up on the job site?
So one of the ways that we do that is we've implemented an EOS, an enterprise operating system. So it's based on a book, Traction, by Gina Wickman. Super, super great system for operating. It's, as most good business books, you're not going to read something and go, oh my gosh, this book is full of things I've never heard of or never experienced. But it's just a really good to help you establish your mission, vision, right? Your goals, your question of why are you doing this? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? So it helps you establish that. But then on a weekly, quarterly, annually basis, it helps you to kind of recalibrate and say, okay, let's not lose sight of the big picture. What are we trying to accomplish this year? That breaks down into quarters. Okay, what are the rocks that we're trying to accomplish this quarter? And then that breaks it down weekly into going, okay, what are the action items we need to do, right, to make progress on those big goals? And so that process just has helped us immensely. I'm just having that rigor, right, around what are we trying to accomplish? How do we do it? How does that break down into daily activities? But then also making sure that we don't get so caught up in the minutia of our to-do list that we lose sight of the big picture. So every week, right, we see our annual goals, we see our quarterly goals, and then we see our weekly and to-do list. We break it all down and then have issues come up, So it's just a really, really good process. So I'd highly recommend anybody that's running a business, check that out. Traction by Gina Wickman. It's super, super helpful.
Thank you for the recommendation. Can you walk us through a recent challenge you faced at one of your companies, what you learned, how you navigated it, and what others could take away?
Yeah, so probably the couple of biggest issues or challenges we've had in the history of our company. So we've been around now since 2012. So I guess 13 years now. The biggest ones have always had to do with us trusting subcontractors and vendors and suppliers more than we should have. not doing the due diligence up front. And then even as issues started to arise, not digging into them hard enough, quickly enough. And I think part of that is just our blind spot as our culture. My specific blind spot as a leader, as a human being, is that I think we all as humans tend to project ourselves on other people that we meet. So in other words, if you're an honest person, you're trying to do the right thing, you naturally assume that the people you interface with are motivated the same way. Conversely, right, if you're dishonest and not truthful, you project that on other people, and then you never trust anyone. So part of our blind spot is that we have that culture going, we're trying to do the right thing, we're being trustworthy, so we project that on other people, and that hasn't always turned out to be the case. Some people put on a good front, and then it turns out that is a front, and it's not their core personality. And so we've tried to mitigate that a bit by saying, hey, let's get some different personalities involved up front in the vetting and the decision making, and bringing some more rigor into how do we team up with people, and then when we do, what is that process like? So as you and all of your listeners are well aware, right, you got optimists, you got pessimists, you got realists, all that. And so we, again, if we have a bias and a blind spot for trusting other people, and we have a bunch of optimists in the room, right, talking to new people, going, hey, let's team up. Well, that's kind of how we got burned. So how do we get some other people in too, some more realistic people with personalities within our organization involved up front early, right? More pragmatic people to go, okay, yeah, that sounds great, but how about this? Hey, we better check this. Hey, let's make sure this documentation is in order. We've tried to be a little more skeptical when we start talking to new people, and I always want to be careful, because I don't want to become, right, a negative, skeptical person, right? We want to make sure that we stay as an organization, as people, as a culture, optimistic, positive, and that. So there's always a balance there, saying, hey, because we've been burned in the past, doesn't mean that we shouldn't try new things, that we shouldn't engage with new people. So there's that balance there. And so I think we're better at it than we have been, just by bringing a bit more rigor, having more people involved in vetting technologies and partners and subcontractors out. But we're not perfect at it. And I don't ever want to be perfect at it, because that's a razor's edge, right? So I want to stay on the side of being a little too trusting versus being too pessimistic, but it'd be awfully nice to be a little closer to the center. And I think we've moved closer to the center. Do we have it figured out? No. Are we getting better at it? Yeah. And it goes back to your question earlier. How do we be nimble? How do you try new things, right? If you're too skeptical, you're never gonna. So there's always that balance, and it all interplays. But that's been the largest challenges we've ever had in our history, have had to do with that, dealing with people that we thought were one way. Turns out they maybe weren't. And I'll also say, in the defense of human beings, right, being part of that race, in defense of human beings, people also can have really good motives. But when times get tough, right, your true colors come out. Even if you say, hey, I want to do the right thing, when times get tough, oftentimes people default into going, hey, I'm going to save my own skin, versus maybe doing the right thing. And so sometimes it's good people you're working with, they're just in a bad spot. So how do you help protect us, our team, our culture from that? And ultimately, is there things you can do even to help other people from getting in too tough of a spot, right? Or could we do something a little differently to give them a hand up that might mitigate some of that negative repercussions as well?
I like that. I like how you want to keep your same thoughts, dispositions, but maybe just using these as opportunities to get wiser, but not more cynical. I appreciate that. That's a good way to look at things. And for our audience of ambitious owners, managers, and sales and marketing professionals, what strategic move would you encourage them to make in 2026 if they want to level up?
So I would say two things. First, read the book Traction, because it just really helps keep your focus on the right spot, right? So that oftentimes, especially when you're starting out, so we started off as the two of us, right? We're now up to almost 30. And when you start off, it's pretty easy to get too caught up in the business, working in the business, and we're not working on the business, right? Because you got to respond, you got to act, you got to keep going on stuff and doing your to-do list and making progress. And so a process like traction just helps keep your head elevated above the waters a little bit and keeps your eyes focused on the long-term goal. So that's super, super helpful. Just having that process in place. So I would highly, highly recommend that. The second thing is if you can find a peer advisory group, that can also be critical. So the one I'm part of, there's a group called the CBMC, the Christian Businessmen's Connection, but it's made up of C-level executives, business owners, right, that come from the same kind of spiritual cloth, or they have the same, right, we have the same mentality around that. But it helps to have some kind of a peer group. And the reason I say that is that it sometimes can be a challenge for business leaders because you're going through, right, issues and challenges that aren't that common. And so you can have a large friend group, right? And you go out and you can have beers and get together and people talk about their kids and those challenges, right? With spouses and relationships and all that. And you can relate to each other, right? And people can feed into you, right? And give you content, right? And things to think about. But if you're a business leader, right, that's far less common. And so oftentimes your friend group is still important for all that stuff you have in common. But sometimes it's hard because you're like, this is what my week was. This is what I'm struggling with, right? And I need some affirmation that I'm not alone. Man, I'd love some suggestions and input. And your friend group might not be able to provide that to you. The only thing that really you can get that is some kind of a peer, right, advisory group where you can relate to other people and go, oh yeah, hey, on the surface, like all these business leaders, yeah, these guys all look polished and like these guys are on a pedestal, like they're just awesome. And the more you get to know them, you go, yeah, you know what? They're struggling with the same things I am. And when you talk about those struggles and go, yeah, I went through that too. Here's what I did. Here's an idea. Hey, I hear what you're going through. You might want to be careful because I see you going down this path that I went down and that wasn't so much fun. Maybe try something else. And conversely, you have the opportunity too to talk to people and go, hey, I hear what you're going through. Let me tell you what I did last year because it was worse, right? Or I learned from it and I did something different. So having that resource to be able to get input, to get guidance, and also just to get affirmation going, what you're going through is not that unique, right? It's not fun all the time. But you're not by yourself. You're not the only one that's ever gone through this. So it's okay. Take a breath. Here's some ideas. Keep moving. So
Yeah, that both great tools, I think, but the peer group in particular, because like you said, those problems can feel so insular and you feel like you're the only person in the world who's experiencing it when that's far from the truth. But Greg, that's going to be a wrap on the Bullpen podcast. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think you've built something special with both InBYLT and Apex, and I really love how you bring together people through purpose, quality, innovation. And for everyone listening, I hope Greg's story got you thinking about what's possible when you lead with intention and put people first. Whether you're building a business or leading a team, I think there's a lot of ways to take away how Greg approaches both growth and culture. And if you like this episode, make sure to follow the Bullpen podcast wherever you listen and share it with someone who's always looking to level up, much like Greg has. Greg, again, thanks for stepping into the Bullpen. Appreciate you.
no, thank you very much for the time today. I appreciate it.